So now your role might be that I am the project manager for the project which is going to automate State Bank of India, 20,000 branches all over India. Right? And the software will be used by 200 million people. Or I'm the project manager for the Aadhaar project, which will capture the fingerprints of 500 million Indian citizens, and so on. So that goal, once it is announced that whoever, the Prime Minister of India or the Chairman of State Bank or the ISRO chairman will announce that Mangalyaan is going to be launched on this date. It has to launch on that date, right? Somebody has to worry about what happens and schedule the entire team to work in that. So that's a project management kind of a skill. Then there are people who might work in research and development, who are now faced with new challenges in what is it that you can do for the future. I talked about the digital 5 forces. They didn't drop out of the sky. There were computer science researchers in universities, in companies, my own, for example, I had TCS Research. I have 800 researchers with PhDs in computer science who work on this. And there are problems that we think about which are not even known to the world at large today, artificial intelligence, for example. So there are people who would do research, they would publish papers, they would go to conferences, they would create intellectual property, they might write patents and so on. So that is another kind of job role that you might look at. Right? So these are various examples. So you might be a programmer, you might be a solution engineer, an architect, a project manager, a researcher. These are various roles. There are many other roles. To finally bring it on a lighter note, what is it that I do? When I was, of course, I've been in TCS all through my working life. My daughter, who was at that time 4 years old, now she's your age, she's 22, 23. She asked me the same question on, Appa, what do you do when you go to office? So I said, what do you think I do when I go to office? You have a computer on your table, you must be playing a lot of computer games. Right, so maybe you do that as well sometimes, right? And you entertain yourself as well. So yeah, it is an interesting career. There are many roles. They're very similar to any engineering, industrial kind of job. Software is no different from many other branches of engineering. When you're a civil engineer, you're a mechanical engineer, you do very similar things. You design products, you develop, you deploy, you manage, you maintain. You understand a problem, create a solution for it. Sometimes you manage teams, sometimes you manage the commercials, and so on. So these are roles that are very common to all branches of engineering.
Surya, I'm from Hindustan University. My question is to Anand sir. I have two questions. One is of relevance to today's topic, and one is of personal interest. First question is why didn't you think big data as one of the digital forces? And second question is I'm doing a course in Oracle. I'm good at Java and interested in cloud computing. Now I have an internship opportunity from IIT Madras. So can you help me figure out any title? They want me to fill in a title which they think is useful so that they give an opportunity for me to do internship. So based on my interest, can you suggest any title?
So the digital 5 forces do include data. I had called it data and analytics. See, this word big data is a little bit overhyped. So I personally don't like it too much. So I didn't use that exact phrase. But in the diagram, if you remember, there was mobility, social, cloud in the middle. The bottom left was data and analytics. So that is where your big data will come in. See, let me explain where this whole big data thing, the phrase is about 7-8 years old. And essentially, it is a different way of handling data at scale. One of the first industries which actually started using data at what is called internet scale was Google, because they had a specific problem to handle large volumes of potential search queries that they could respond to very fast. So they solved that problem in a very unique way by creating a software architecture which is called the Google file system, and a way to actually search that using a technique called MapReduce. This was published externally in 2004 or 2005. Sanjay Ghemawat, one of the founders of MapReduce and the Google file system, is of course of Indian origin. And once that paper came out, a lot of other people, including people at Yahoo Research, again headed by an Indian, Raghu Ramakrishnan, founded the open source version of what Google had done, the Google file system and MapReduce, and that became Hadoop, which is the forerunner of what you call big data. Now, while big data started in Google and Yahoo and the internet companies and Amazon and eBay and all the e-commerce companies, it became very fashionable to talk about data at that scale. The truth is that these technologies, as they are used in many industries today, are actually used for conventional amounts of data, because very few people are generating that kind of data other than the internet companies themselves. But there are opportunities now. I mentioned material science is one area where big data will be required. Medical science, with especially genetic data, that will be hugely bigger than even the internet data. A typical human genome or sequence of our chromosomes, the 46 chromosomes that make up a human being, the raw data for that runs into hundreds of gigabytes for one individual. Now, there are several countries which are starting to get their entire population's gene sequence. Qatar is the first one. Qatar has very, very few people. There's about 500,000 Qataris only. But Qatar says that in the next 3 years, they will produce a genome footprint sequence of every Qatari citizen. There are smaller countries which might do that. But now think about the data which is required to be stored, and not just raw data, but processed data. So big data will come in genomics. Ramnath Mani mentioned process engineering, sensor data. That is huge. For a single plant, the amount of data which gets produced in a paper mill or a manufacturing plant will be huge. If you actually have to store it and then process it and then learn from it, a small industry itself will be a big data problem. And so on. There are many other industrial areas where big data will come. Genomics, manufacturing, automotive, I mentioned the traffic patterns and so on. They are all big data areas. So they are one of the computer science people have invented big data. That's why it's the fourth force. The usage of big data is going to come in the next 5-10 years as all these other disciplines start realizing what can be done with the data. Whether it is civil, mechanical, medical science, healthcare, process control, anything you name will potentially have data techniques. So don't lose hope. There is a lot to be done in the data space. But computer scientists can't do it alone. They will have to interact with these other disciplines to understand what data requirements they have. Then we can engineer the right solution. To your specific point, we'll talk to you offline as well. But since you've got some capability in the technologies that you mentioned, Oracle, Java, and so on, what I suggest is that you pick a computer science problem that you feel excited about. I presume that your internship request is with the computer sciences department or IIT Madras. So pick something which is pushing the boundaries of what you know in the thing that you already know, but go beyond it. So if you're looking at something which can be at the boundary of transactional information and bounding into big data, for example, that's a good way of saying, I know this, but I want to go here. So when you write your statement of purpose or your application, don't stay with what you're comfortable. I know Oracle, I know Java, I will do Oracle and Java. That you can do here also. But see what lies beyond what you know, and maybe you pick one of the disciplines. Inspired by today, you might like to pick industrial automation as a possible area that you might work on. But show that you want to go beyond what you know, and that will hopefully stand you in good stead.
I want to add a point here. I was talking about industrial automation and the process industry. One of the biggest area on which work is going on in the industrial automation arena is on big data. As Anant rightly mentioned, huge amount of data comes out of factories from processes. And mind you, industrial automation operates on real time as against, data-based data. It is actually not a data-based data, it's real-time data. Every second actually huge amount of data is generated. And people are still working on it and wanting to know what is the useful information that comes out of all these data. I mean, they are still figuring it out. I mean, this data has to become useful data from which, you can arrive at some conclusions and then, change your processes, change your, the way you are producing and how you look at production. The other area that people are working on this big data is huge amount of data is collected. Then now you have to filter it, get the useful data and get it in your mobile. Because slowly, what people are working, at least in the US, it started, they call it the BYOD, I think, bring your own devices. No more the company gives you the devices. You bring your own devices and then, they give you certain passwords which you can access towards your, your work. and you should be able to rattle out your production figures, data that is coming out of the machines, where the losses occurred, if, there was some failure, when it occurred, you should be able to see wherever you are 24/7 on your mobile. These are all coming out of big data. So, they all work up to what they call again the SCADA, and then, they filter it out, and then, they work in various areas. Therefore, there are some very, very, exciting areas on this big data to work on in industrial automation also. So you may like to look at it. Thank you.
I'm Nisha from B.S. Abdurrahman University. I want to ask a question to Mr. Mani. As everyone knows, in our country, we don't have much focus on industrial automation field. And then how about the focus in German countries or in European countries? Then whether by having this bachelor degree, we can able to enter in those MNC companies, or we want to do MS in some abroad?
Today the conditions are, there is a huge amount of shortage of automation engineers in the country itself. You can't get good automation engineers. There are huge opportunities here. One need not go to do an MS to Germany to do automation engineering, in my opinion, because, it's not the same in other countries. The other countries, there is not that much of dearth of automation engineers as it is in India, because it's an emerging market and huge production capacity is getting created. If you want to do research, if you want to do PhD, if you want to do higher level education, then obviously you can go there and work. And of course, there are some who can get opportunities after doing MS there also. But I think the opportunities are lying here in India, in my opinion.
Maybe what he wants to know is their BTech sufficient to get into that line?
I think BTech is very much sufficient to get into the line, because much of it is actually hands-on experience rather than, I think at the industrial automation level, people between an MTech and a BTech, there's not much of a difference.
So, I'm from Agni College of Technology. So, I'm going to ask a question to Mr. JK sir. Sir, I'm fixed our mind to entrepreneurship, but how to make a progress on it?
I think it's a very important question. I want to become an entrepreneur. Where and how should I become an entrepreneur? Am I right? So we put down 2 or 3 questions in that presentation. Is it based on something you know, or is it based on an opportunity that exists? So first, zone in on something you think you can either solve a problem, or you have found some difficulty somewhere and you say, hey, I'm going to work towards finding a solution for that. That's a starting point. So try and don't just limit it to what you know, but observant around yourself. You say, students are not able to schedule the classes to which they need to go to. Something, you understand? I'm saying, as you are a student now, or what you observed around your house, in other interactions, in other things you find, I found this difficulty. My friends found this difficulty. Somebody mentioned that this was a problem. So you start to say, hey, is there something I can do to find a solution? That's your starting point. Let then the idea form. From that, let you work towards it.